It looks like someone made a ton of money on non-public information that President Trump's massive tariffs were going into effect. And it also looks like someone made a killing on info that some of those tariffs were going to be rolled back. Now everyone's asking whether President Trump or his inner circle exploited non-public information for personal gain, aka insider trading. So did President Trump quietly tip off friends or family about his tariff plans? And what does it take legally for that to cross the line into insider trading? To find out, we have to follow the money and the law. On April 2nd, President Trump unveiled the most sweeping tariff hike since 1930s, declaring it Liberation Day. The plan imposed a 10% baseline tariff on all imported goods, with steeper levies targeting products from 60 specific countries. The announcement sent shockwaves through the financial markets, wiping out $5 trillion from the S&P 500. And when the tariffs took effect on April 5th, the markets continued to freefall. The tariffs hit nearly every country on Earth, including islands uninhabited by humans. That'll teach those pesky penguins on the Heard and McDonald Islands. It was a dark time. But while Americans panicked over losing their life savings, President Trump golfed and dished out some investment advice. And on April 9th at 9:37 a.m., Trump posted on Truth Social, "This is a great time to buy DJT." Then, later that day at 1:18 p.m., Trump unexpectedly, for most of us, announced a 90-day pause in country-by-country tariffs. What a scamp. He said, quote, "I have authorized a 90-day pause and substantially lowered reciprocal tariff," again, these are not reciprocal, "during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Although Trump did not pause the universal 10% tariffs or the tariffs on America's largest trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China, the market boomed for the rest of the day. The S&P 500 rose 9.5% by the close of the trading on April 9th. Trump's own company, DJT, surged, raising Trump's net worth by an estimated $415 million in one day. And certain people made a lot of money from buying the dip. And later that week, Trump bragged to a group of NASCAR drivers about how much money people made after the tariff pause. In the Oval Office, Trump and his wealthy friends celebrated.
He made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. That's it.
One of the men in the clip is Charles Schwab, the founder of the brokerage firm of the same name. Trump said Schwab made an estimated $2.5 billion from the sudden tariff reversal. And there is strong evidence that based on the trading activity on the market, a lot of people knew what was going to happen before it happened. A lot of people bought zero-day options right before the announcement was made. Zero-day options are normal options, puts and calls, that expire on less than 1 day and are meant to capitalize on short-term same-day fluctuations. So when all of this came to light and Trump bragged on camera about making his friends a lot of money, a lot of people had the same reaction. The president obviously tipped off his rich friends.
Well, what it does do, look, if you know 2 hours earlier that the stock market's going to go, what are you going to do? You're going to buy a hell of a lot of stock. You can invest in the stock market.
Senators Adam Schiff and Ruben Gallego sent a letter to the Office of Government Ethics urging an investigation. They warned that the president, his family, and his advisors are uniquely positioned to be privy to and take advantage of non-public information to inform their investment decisions. For example, Tesla stock rose 18% immediately after Trump's announcement. Musk is a special government employee who is certainly privy to inside information about the entire government, including decisions that impact his companies. Kel McClanahan and I discussed the ethical nightmare posed by Musk's presence in the White House, so check that out to learn about whether Musk is subject to additional disclosure laws. But the question is, did Trump or his associates violate securities laws during the aftermath of the tariff announcement? Well, that depends on how we interpret insider trading laws. Now, insider trading is buying or selling a security, like stocks, based on material non-public information about the company. Insider trading can be legal if the trade is made with proper disclosure and reporting. But if the trade is based on inside information and violates a duty of trust or confidence, insider trading is illegal. No federal security law prohibits or defines insider trading. Instead, insider trading is governed by a combination of securities laws, regulations, and court decisions, especially the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. These sources prohibit trading in securities on the basis of material non-public information, known as MNPI, with an intent to deceive and in breach of a duty of trust or confidence. And the most important source of the insider trading prohibition is Section 10B of the Exchange Act. SEC Rule 10b-5-1 of the Act makes it unlawful to, quote, make any untrue statement of a material fact or to omit to state a material fact necessary in connection with the purchase or sale of any security. Other regulations banning insider trading apply to specific situations like Rule 14e-3, which prohibits insider trading in connection with tender offers, and Section 17A of the Securities Act, which bans fraud in connection with the offer or sale of securities. But generally speaking, liability for insider trading arises when 1, a person traded while in possession, 2, of material non-public information, 3, in breach of a fiduciary duty or other relationship of trust and confidence, 4, in exchange for value, 5, with knowledge and scienter. So first, the trader has to be in possession of material non-public information. Second, the information has to be non-public and material. Information is non-public if it has not yet been disseminated broadly to the marketplace. Information is deemed material if there is a substantial likelihood that a reasonable investor would consider it important enough to significantly alter the total mix of information used in making an investment decision. The third element is breach of duty. This occurs when someone obtains information because of a fiduciary or other similar relationship of trust or confidence. In traditional insider trading, this usually means that corporate insiders, such as a director, officer, or employees of a company, can't make trades based on material non-public information that they obtained in connection with their positions. But corporate outsiders are also prohibited from trading based on MNPI. Outsiders generally include external service providers such as lawyers, accountants, and family members of corporate insiders. And the fourth element is an exchange of value. The government must show that the insider, known as the tipper, shared the information with the trader, the tippee, in return for something of value, a personal benefit. The fifth element, scienter, or mens rea, means acting knowingly or with intent. The person who receives an insider tip can be held liable for trading on it, but the government has to prove two things: that the tippee knew the tipper was breaking a rule, and that the tippee personally gained from the trade. And that's a pretty tough standard to meet. Now, one of the most famous tippees involved in insider trading is probably Martha Stewart. However, Stewart actually did not go to prison for trading on an insider tip. In 2001, Stewart sold nearly 4,000 shares of M-Clone Systems just before the stock dropped, saving herself about $45,000 in losses. Her broker, Peter Bukonovich, told her that M-Clone CEO Sam Waxel was dumping his stock, which looked suspicious because it happened right before the FDA was expected to deny approval of an M-Clone cancer drug. Now, the tip wasn't public, which made it seem like insider trading. However, the government couldn't prove that Stewart knew the information was material and non-public with the necessary intent. In other words, they couldn't prove insider trading beyond a reasonable doubt. But when Stewart lied to investigators about why she sold the stock and attempted to cover it up, that provided enough evidence for her conviction on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. And as usual, if you're contemplating doing crimes, please remember that the cover-up can be worse than the crime itself. And don't do crimes. Now, if you engaged in insider trading, you'll want a good lawyer. And hey, because of all that money you stole, you can probably afford it. But if you want a great lawyer, let my law firm, the Eagle Team, help. And by the way, with Eagle Team, we don't get paid unless you do, so there's nothing up front. But if you've ever gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got a data breach letter saying your information might have been leaked, or are dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. So did Trump and his cronies violate insider trading laws? Well, it depends. He had a lot of information about the tariff policies. He's the one that set them. Who did he share this info with, and what did they do with it? Well, consider the timeline of his Truth Social posts. At 9:33 a.m., Trump said, quote, "Be cool, everything is going to work out well. The USA will be bigger and better than ever before." That post hit shortly after the New York Stock Exchange opened, and a few minutes later at 9:37 a.m., Trump posted, "This is a great time to buy." And if you look at the chart of the S&P 500 index, there was a small bump at 9:37, probably in response to Trump's post. Then Trump announced his tariff pause at 11:18 p.m. with another Truth Social post, quote, "I've authorized a 90-day pause and substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention on this matter." And at 1:19 p.m., there was a huge bump in the S&P index. So yes, the market went up when he posted, but obviously that's not insider trading yet. His early post could be seen as an attempt to signal to insiders to capitalize on impending policy changes. By now, because I'm pausing the tariffs and the market will surge. But as Bloomberg's Matt Levine pointed out, that anyone who saw Trump's post was privy to President Trump's investment advice, so the posts alone aren't definitive because they were public and everybody had the chance to see them at the same time. But we don't know what Trump was up to before those posts. The 4-hour gap between Trump's "Be Cool" and "Buy Now" posts and the tariff pause announcement gave people ample time to act on his advice. Does that prove that Trump was secretly handing out insider tips? Maybe, we have no idea right now. To make that case, we need to prove that the parties involved knew that the president had confidential information about the tariff reversal and acted with intent to deceive or defraud. Now, it would be vital to know who had the information about the tariff pause before that became public information, and the best evidence would be the communications that may or may not have been circulated before or during those announcements. So it's a good thing that no one in the Trump administration is using a text messaging app that automatically deletes messages after a set amount of time, because that would be a huge security risk and a huge violation of Presidential Records Acts. But Donald Trump isn't the only one at risk of violating securities laws. 4 groups could be implicated: executive branch employees, cabinet members, Trump's friends and family, and members of Congress. Now, federal employees are bound by strict ethical rules that prohibit them from using government information for private gain. Chief among them is a regulation located at 5 CFR section 2635.101, which states that public service is a public trust, and therefore under another regulation, 5 CFR section 2635 .703, federal workers are prohibited from using non-public information for personal gain. Quote, non-public information refers to any information obtained through federal employment that the employee knows or should reasonably know hasn't been made public. And the rule applies to all employees of the executive branch. And the idea is simple. If you learn something in your government role, you can't turn around and use that to make money on the stock market. An employee who violates these standards may be suspended, demoted, or removed from federal service. And each agency's office of the Inspector General or the Ethics Office enforces these rules. Unfortunately, as you know, Trump has gutted most of the Inspector General offices, which will make it a lot harder to catch employees who broke the law. And if the circumstances suggest insider trading, the case may be referred to the DOJ for criminal prosecution. And specifically, if an executive branch employee trades on confidential government information like upcoming changes in tariff rates or knowledge of pending economic sanctions, that would absolutely be a textbook example of insider trading under Rule 10b-5. But prosecuting government employees for insider trading presents significant challenges. Take the case of David Blaszczak, a former official at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. After leaving his post, Blaszczak became a consultant for hedge funds, leveraging his insider connections to obtain confidential information about upcoming changes to Medicare reimbursement rates. He then tipped off his hedge fund clients, who traded on that information before it became public. Blaszczak and several employees of CMS were convicted of violating Rule 10b-5 and of wire fraud. However, the Second Circuit ultimately overturned the convictions, ruling that confidential government information, including upcoming Medicare rate changes, is not considered property or securities information in the same way that corporate secrets are. And the court concluded that CMS decisions are policy choices, not proprietary assets, even if they affect financial markets. This reasoning was based on the Supreme Court's Bridgegate decision, where it ruled that politically motivated lane closures on the George Washington Bridge, which was ordered by aides of Governor Chris Christie to retaliate against the mayor of Fort Lee, did not amount to wire fraud, as they didn't result in the loss of money or property. So this is yet another area of law where the Supreme Court has made it harder to combat corruption. Now, turning to Trump's cabinet members, these individuals are members of the executive branch and are subject to the Ethics in Government Act. Given their access to even more sensitive information than other executive employees, they face additional layers of oversight. They're also covered by the Stock Act of 2012, which clarified that executive officials can be prosecuted for insider trading and must disclose their trades within 45 days. And cabinet members can be prosecuted under major securities laws, including Rule 10b-5. So if on the day in question Trump had a meeting with Marco Rubio, and at noon he told Rubio that he was going to lift a whole bunch of the tariffs, and then Rubio went out and bought a whole bunch of options in the stock market before the 1 p.m. announcement, Rubio could be prosecuted for insider trading. Now, Trump's friends and family aren't all government employees this time around, but based on everything we know about these people, the likelihood of them trading on insider information seems pretty high. In fact, there's all kinds of evidence that the Kushners and the Trumps engaged in all kinds of shady deals the first time around. But if they were given confidential, non-public information and then acted on it like anybody else, that would be textbook insider trading. Now, Congress is a little bit different. Members of Congress are subject to the Stock Act, which explicitly bars them and other federal employees from using non-public information gained through their official duties for their own personal financial benefit. Take Apple, for example. When Trump announced these sweeping tariffs, Apple stock suffered its biggest single-day drop in 5 years. But just days later, on April 11th, the administration announced that electronics, including smartphones and laptops, would be excluded from those tariffs. Now, those tariffs were eventually walked back or claimed to never have been walked back, but that kind of market-moving reversal is exactly the sort of inside information that members of Congress might have had information on. And case in point, on April 8th and 9th, days before Trump's tariff pause, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene purchased between $21,000 and $315,000 in stocks, including shares in Apple, though she claims the trades were made by a financial advisor under a fiduciary agreement and fully disclosed. But many of her stocks rebounded sharply after Trump announced his pause. So what does the law say? Well, Section 4 of the Stock Act affirms that members of Congress are not exempt from insider trading prohibitions under existing securities laws. The act also requires members of Congress and certain government officials to report any trades over $1,000 within 45 days. But the Stock Act does not impose criminal penalties for insider trader violations. Criminal penalties for insider trading are governed by other federal securities laws, but the penalty for violating the Stock Act's disclosure provisions is comical. A fine of up to $200 for late disclosures.
Scary.
And on top of that, no member of Congress has ever been prosecuted under the Stock Act, despite numerous suspicious trades tied to financial briefings and policy decisions. And given how toothless the Stock Act has become, that's why a lot of lawmakers argue that Congress shouldn't trade stocks at all, and I would agree with those people. In 2022, Senators John Ossoff and Mark Kelly introduced the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act to prohibit members and their families from buying or selling individual stocks while in office. Unfortunately, the bill stalled in committee. But after the tariff fiasco, it's gaining momentum again. But unfortunately, all this brings us back to a familiar problem. Presidents have broad immunity from prosecution, and as we've discussed, more often than I would like, it is almost impossible to prosecute a sitting president. So all this leaves us in the same uncomfortable position that we often are with President Trump. He is subject to the same securities laws as any other American citizen, but he's virtually untouchable both during office and after because of the immunity that he now possesses.
Thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget.
Now, if you were one of the inside traders, when you buy your first foreign beachfront property, be sure to get a local eSIM for your phone, because even if you've effectively stolen millions by illegally using insider government information, you still don't want to pay excessive roaming fees, which you can avoid with today's sponsor, Saley. Saley is a fantastic way to get high-speed data on your cell phone whenever you travel abroad or travel to places in the country without safe and secure Wi-Fi. Saley is an incredible eSIM service app from your friends at Nord Security, so you know it's quality. It's a great alternative to buying a local SIM card because it works in 160 countries across 8 global regions. And by clicking on the link or using my code LegalEagle, we'll get you an exclusive 50% off your first purchase. Now, if you've ever been lost abroad or only have access to sketchy public Wi-Fi that could steal your data, you'll understand what a difference a local SIM card can make. And an eSIM provides you a secure internet connection wherever you travel, while saving you tons of money on roaming fees and data overages. By using a Saley eSIM, you never have to remember that all the photos and videos that you're going to take on vacation are now quietly uploading in the background, blowing up the data allowance and costing a fortune. Not that I've ever made that mistake before, but with the Saley app, getting an eSIM for your iOS or Android device couldn't be simpler. You just buy a plan and activate it all in the Saley app or on the website. And once you've got it activated, you can use the internet wherever you go without needing to pop into a cafe and pray they have a decent Wi-Fi or at least some security. And an eSIM with Saley saves you tons of time when it matters most. There's no need to wait in line at the airport to get a local physical SIM card because the Saley eSIM is entirely virtual. It just works. So click on the link below or use the code LegalEagle to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. A Saley eSIM really is a traveler's best friend, and it's the best decision you can make before going to another country. So click on the link below to get 15% off. And after that, click on this link over here for more LegalEagle, or I'll see you in court.